Hello, everyone. Welcome to Diplomatic Commentary. President Trump's first 100 days in office, unlike the spirited journey of his first term's 100 days, 8 years later, at this originally celebratory milestone, Trump finds himself in a bad mood due to his own aggressive tariffs. China not only responded firmly, but Foreign Minister Wang Yi, while attending the BRICS meeting, called on the world, especially southern countries, to stand up and say no to US tariffs. Foreign Minister Wang Yi attended the BRICS formal members and partner countries' foreign ministers meeting to discuss the theme of strengthening multilateralism. Wang Yi stated that the solution to the world's problems lies in upholding and practicing multilateralism. The expanded BRICS should continue to advocate for joint consultation, joint construction, and shared benefits, uphold the basic principles of international relations, defend the multilateral trading system, and build a more fair and reasonable global governance system. Wang Yi said that in the face of the US wielding the tariff stick globally, all countries should make a choice. Are we going to allow the world to return to the law of the jungle where the strong prey on the weak? Do we accept that the private interests of one country can override the public good of all countries? Are we going to allow international rules to be ignored or even abandoned? Is it possible to remain unaffected just by compromising and retreating? And the ultimate question is, are we going to accept a unipolar hegemony that puts itself above all, or welcome a multipolar world that is equal and orderly? Wang Yi emphasized that the times do not allow for regression, and fairness is recognized by all. Regarding the trade war, China's response is clear and firm. If they insist on fighting, we will fight to the end. If they are prepared to negotiate, it must be with equality and respect. China is focused not only on its own legitimate rights and interests, but also on the common interests of all countries. China is defending not only mutually beneficial cooperation, but also international rules. China is upholding not only national and ethnic dignity, but also the clear and bright world of humanity. Let's turn to look at the situation within the United States. Behind Trump's frantic tariff increases, he claims it is to bring manufacturing back to the US. When reviewing and assessing Trump's first 100 days of his second term, some US media found a rather ironic story. From this, it can also be seen that China holds more leverage in the China-US trade war. On April 29th, Bloomberg published a long article revealing the poignant fate of a factory called Ames True Temper. On April 29, 2017, Trump went to the Ames True Temper single-wheel wheelbarrow factory in Pennsylvania to celebrate his first 100 days in office, highlighting his great achievement in promoting the return of manufacturing to the US. 8 years later, as Trump reached another 100-day milestone, the factory that once embodied his dream of reviving American manufacturing was no longer there. As the chaos triggered by Trump's tariffs intensified, Bloomberg's article pointed out that this was a microcosm of the harsh reality facing American manufacturing. The article noted that although the US government repeatedly claimed to revive American manufacturing, the actual employment growth was minimal, significantly lagging behind the overall labor force growth rate. Issues such as cumbersome approval processes and inadequate infrastructure remain unresolved. The tariffs, which Trump placed high hopes on, are unlikely to reverse the decades-long trend of industrial relocation from the United States. The Ames factory, located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, has nearly 150 years of production history, with its tool manufacturing history tracing back to 1774. This factory once supplied iron products to George Washington's army and the sculptors of Mount Rushmore, and its single-wheel wheelbarrows aided in the construction of the Hoover Dam. For Trump, this was clearly an excellent stage to promote his plan to revitalize American factory jobs. At the time, Trump spoke to reporters in front of a makeshift desk set up in the factory workshop, saying, "I believe in American manufacturing. Its comeback is stronger, of higher quality, and faster than I even expected." In the presence of cabinet members and employees on site, Trump signed 2 executive orders, and less than a year later, his initial tariff policies were officially implemented. On April 29th, 8 years later, Trump marked the first 100 days of his second term, at which point he initiated another round of tariff wars, continuing to promote the plan for manufacturing reshoring. But this time it already sparked concerns of financial market turmoil and economic recession. As for the Ames factory, it no longer exists. In 2023, the parent company of the factory decided to close this plant, which once held 85% of the US market share for single-wheel wheelbarrows, and moved production overseas. 2 factories in Pennsylvania were forced to close, resulting in the loss of over 250 jobs. The company stated in its earnings call that this is part of a global sourcing strategy. Now, when you walk into this store, the True Temple single-wheel wheelbarrows are already marked with Made in China. Bloomberg says that although single-wheel wheelbarrows represent only a tiny fraction of the $30 trillion US economy, the closure of the Ames factory in Harrisburg has become a microcosm of the harsh economic realities plaguing American manufacturing. For many businesses, especially after the implementation of Trump's latest tariffs, this predicament has been worsening. Although the idea that the US should have the capability to produce key goods from semiconductors to steel has gained widespread support, there is still a lack of consensus on how to achieve these goals. The article states that Trump might eventually be able to prove that the magic of tariffs he advocates can indeed bring jobs back to the US. However, history and economics are not on his side. Moreover, when he tries to coerce or restrain manufacturers from expanding domestic production, he faces increasing obstacles. This is largely due to the failure of his policies. Tariffs have only added to the operational challenges businesses already face, which include labor shortages, inadequate power grids, and bureaucratic red tape. During Trump's first 100 days in office, those unexpected trade policies are precisely what made things more difficult. From giants like Ford and Tesla to small family-run shops, over 1,100 companies have submitted exemption requests in an attempt to avoid tariffs on imported equipment from China. The president and CEO of the National Association of Manufacturers, Timmons, said, "Frankly, I think manufacturers are very concerned about the tariffs." Recently, close monitoring of manufacturing activity by the New York and Philadelphia Federal Reserve branches has shown a decline in production, reduced working hours, and a general pessimism among factory managers about the future. However, the White House dismisses these signs of weakness, instead touting over $1.6 trillion in corporate investments announced by companies like Apple, Hyundai, and Nvidia since taking office, along with recent manufacturing employment growth data. But in fact, the White House's encouragement of investment is merely superficial. The investments they boast about are merely verbal commitments, and the employment growth is not significant. In the first 3 months of this year, manufacturing employment in the US increased by only 4,000 people, which is less than 0.1% of the industry's 12.8 million workforce. As of March this year, employment in US factories was 430,000 higher than when Trump took office in January 2017. However, over the past 8 years, the 3.5% growth in employment is less than half the growth rate of the overall labor force during the same period. Moreover, the number of people working in US factories is still nearly 7 million less than the peak in 1979. An article from Bloomberg suggests that this issue is not solely caused by Trump. Biden is advocating for a manufacturing boom driven by legislation passed by Democrats, aimed at stimulating investment in semiconductors, wafer plants, and factories producing electric vehicles and batteries. However, last year the US lost over 100,000 manufacturing jobs, and even some of Trump's supporters are skeptical about his ability to reverse this decades-long trend. On April 25th, at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, Citadel founder Ken Griffin said, "Trump dreams of restoring people's dignity, and I have to applaud him for having such a dream." But then he quickly changed his tone, saying that these jobs are not going to return to the US. Besides labor costs, there are other reasons for the outsourcing of American manufacturing, such as factory automation has increased productivity and electric vehicles have fewer moving parts than traditional cars, resulting in these factories employing fewer workers. The current issue is not just about bringing jobs back. Many economists predict that Trump's extreme tariff policies will almost immediately trigger economic shocks domestically and globally. In the long run, these policies may lead to greater isolation for the US and a decline in competitiveness. Ryan Unger, president and CEO of the Harrisburg Regional Chamber, said that the relocation of the AMGS plant took local officials by surprise and is a significant blow to the local economy. He said, "You never want to see a company move away from your area." Meanwhile, a startup in Pittsburgh hopes that the Trump administration will consider reducing tariffs on Chinese machinery so they can build a factory in the US. Trump's policies are affecting the profits of such startups. Currently, some customers of this startup have already cancelled orders because they can no longer afford the cost of importing Chinese components, and they also cannot find domestic alternatives. Now, at the former site of the AMGS plant, the factory's sign is no longer visible, and the only trace of the factory's existence is a dozen or so AMGS-branded trailers parked haphazardly. Bloomberg's article summarizes it by quoting Harrisburg Chamber of Commerce President Unger, saying that these jobs have been continuously disappearing over the past 8 years. This makes Trump's call at the 2017 event sound more like a portent of doom rather than a message of hope. He remarked with emotion, "We are just getting started." The conclusion is that even with something as simple as a single-wheel wheelbarrow with limited parts and accessories and no need for highly skilled operations, the US still cannot find enough local parts support. Ultimately, it cannot compete with the high costs in America and has to surrender, shifting production to China. Low-end manufacturing cannot return. Not to mention the idea of moving the production line of Apple phones with tens of thousands of components back to the US, which is truly a fantasy. The experience of AMGS, with the single-wheel wheelbarrow, is the greatest irony for American politicians and proves that without Chinese manufacturing, every aspect of American daily life would be affected.